Viva la raza. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. Eddie Guerrero coined the famous catchphrase, I lie, I cheat, I steal. He certainly lied and cheated in so many of his wrestling matches all over the country, all over the world. And when it came to stealing, he stole the hearts, minds, and souls of so many professional wrestling fans all across the globe. And then one of the most influential wrestlers of the last 25, 30 some odd years. A man that was born, bred, and was absolutely perfect when he was on. There was nobody goddamn better. Eddie, from a charisma standpoint and in-ring standpoint, absolutely captivated so many fans. And on November 13th, 2005, one of the saddest days in professional wrestling history, in my personal opinion, Eddie Guerrero passed away. And I was a fucking wreck. And so many other people were wrecks. Not just wrestling fans, colleagues. It was a gut punch. It was a gut-wrenching just day, week, month. It still haunts me and haunts so many people to this very day. Eddie Guerrero left such an indelible, impossible to fill mark on wrestling. And I'm here to talk about what if Eddie Guerrero didn't pass away so young at age 38. What if he had lived on? What would his future have been? Let's celebrate the life of Eddie Guerrero and talk about various scenarios. As I'm John Rentham with my real honest thoughts on what if Eddie Guerrero didn't pass away in 2005. Yes, he had his demons. Yes, he had his problems. He was open about that. And unfortunately, by the time he said enough's enough, his body had basically said, that's it. By basically, he was on borrowed time, and he did an amazing amount of work despite being in so much goddamn pain. I mean, if you could see it on his face, you couldn't tell with his in-ring work, but you could just see it just behind his eyes. Those that had watched him grow up, those that had seen him in AAA, those that had seen him in WCW and in ECW, the brief appearances on the Indies, the comeback to WWE. It was astonishing that Eddie Guerrero, for all the abuse that he put upon his body, all the stuff he ingested, all the stuff he talked about, that he was able to live as long as he did, and what a mark he left. And yeah, Eddie Guerrero's death, probably the hardest hitting one ever. It was really, really difficult. And now I'm here to talk about, the beginning of his life, his career and everything, talk about the high points. And thank you very much to everybody for the what-if scenarios that they've left in the comments, that other people have, commented on Twitter. I will get to them when I can. This is the first of 7 new ones that I have, set up for this month, possibly February. We will see. But as far as Eddie Guerrero, one of my favorite wrestlers ever. One of the wrestlers I would put on Mount Rushmore. And yeah, I know that might seem a little bit weird to people, but Eddie would be on there as far as influential. I mean, and, I was already a big wrestling fan before I discovered Eddie Guerrero. And I do remember actually being at a friend's house and seeing When Worlds Collide, where him and Art Barr did that hair versus mask match. And I'm going to talk about that here in a bit, but looking back, even from an early age, he was born on October 9th, 1967 in El Paso, Texas, named Gory Guerrero. Legendary name in, Hispanic wrestling. Promoted in El Paso. There was always El Santo was here and Gory Guerrero was here. Even though, and there's not a ton of footage that's available on YouTube. I've seen some clips, and I've seen a couple matches. Gory lived up to the name. He certainly lived up to the name as far as the blood, the violence, and stuff like that, but he was technically sound. He was also legit tough and promoted in El Paso. And his kids got into wrestling. The extended family got into wrestling. Eddie was in a wrestling ring from a very early age. And there's Hector and Mondo, Chavo Sr., and there's Chavo Jr. So many of the Guerreros just getting into wrestling. It was in their blood. It was like they were born to do it. Maybe he was born with it. Maybe it's made by lean. No, I'm sorry. But Eddie would entertain people during the intermission. He would get in there and wrestle with his brothers and stuff like that, and people would be entertained during these shows. He debuted in September of '86, and he'd bounce around here and there. I do recall seeing him on the Super Clash 3 card. That was pretty much just Vern basically not wanting to throw in the towel on the AWA, but it was cool to see him there, even though there really wasn't a big crowd there at Super Clash 3. If you've seen Super Clash 3, you get it. Only the first Super Clash ever had a big crowd. And then he bounced around from Mexico, Japan. He would be Black Tiger in a stint in Japan, wrestle in the junior heavyweight division. He was brought in for some job matches in WCW. Eddie Guerrero was picked by Terry Funk. Terry Funk, having worked out of Amarillo, knew Corey Guerrero well, or at least well enough to where he's like, okay, his kid, yeah, I definitely want to work with his kid, and he gave him a lot. I do recall seeing that match. I don't remember what episode it was on. I think it was before the network went to the cock. But then he was translated to the Pain of Terror. He teamed with Art Barr, yeah, you want to talk about a piece of shit right there. Art Barr, who assaulted, and I'm going to use the word assault in lieu of another much darker word. A woman in Portland, a young girl in Portland, actually. Art Barr is a piece of shit, and I hope he suffered mightily at the end of his life. But let's get back to the positives. Yeah, when Worlds Collide, which is something that I need to retro-review at some point. The hair versus mask match. Art Barr died in late November of 1994. Nothing of value was lost. Even though the guy had a hell of a frog splash, he did. You take a look at him, and then you take a look at D'Lo Brown. You kind of see where the frog splash stuff came in. Eddie Guerrero obviously wanting to take the frog splash, and he made it his own and made it better, in my opinion. But he was Black Tiger 2 in Japan. He won the Best of Super Juniors in 1996. That was during the New Japan WCW working relationship. He would meet Chris Benoit as Wild Pegasus in Japan. They would talk about, that was talked about at length in the Dark Side of the Ring Benoit 2-parter, which is still really, really difficult to watch because of the reliving the Eddie Guerrero passing. Boy, I felt so. It brought back everything that I felt. But series of matches in ECW. B2 Colt Scorpio for the TV title. Series of matches against Dean Malenko for the TV championship. Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero could not have a bad match if they tried. They could go half speed, and they would still put on an instant fucking classic because they were just born to fucking do it. And then he'd also met Dean in New Japan. And then they got signed to WCW along with a slew of other people. They were, I believe, the Three Amigos, I believe is what they called themselves in Japan. At least as far as backstage. Part of the Cruiserweight division, Eddie helped establish it. Not that, because there was a light heavyweight division. Pillman, rest in peace, Brian Pillman, and so many others had actually tried to do their best with the WCW light heavyweight division, but that got nixed pretty early on, I think it was in summer of 92, summer or late or early fall of 92. That got taken away. The junior heavyweights exploded in Japan. Obviously, the high-flying Lucha Libre was in Mexico. And then Eric Bischoff realized, hey, wait a second, I got Nitro. I got this put in my lap. I need to get a bunch of people. And he had that working relationship with New Japan. He didn't poach him from ECW because they had a working relationship with New Japan, and New Japan was paying him a lot more money than Paul Heyman was. And then Eddie would quickly rise up the ranks. People respected him. How could you not respect Eddie Guerrero's work? He competed against Ric Flair for the U.S. Championship. He also faced off against DDP, King of the Battle Bowl ring, bada bing. But yeah, I believe it was Hog Wild 96 for the U.S. title. That was a great goddamn match. And feuded with Dean Malenko into early 97. Had a great match at Starrcade 97 to cap off the year. Did team up with Jericho and then faced him. I believe it was Fall Brawl 97 where nobody really cared about the match, which is a shame because it was really goddamn great. As you would expect with those two at that point. Yeah, Jericho actually did contribute positive things to wrestling once upon a time. Eddie would, and he won the U.S. title from Dean. I believe they traded a little bit back and forth and stuff like that. It was a little bit messy, but they would always have great matches. I think even their uncensored 97 match was a little bit messy with the finish. Still good, because it's Eddie and Dean. And then the feud with Ray. Turned heel. was a cruiserweight champion. Eddie is a heel. You couldn't help but respect him, but he could get you to fucking hate him. He could get you to absolutely want to just watch him just get ripped limb from limb. Because Eddie was just a natural at that. And Halloween Havoc 97 is one of my top 10 favorite matches ever. Yes, there's the stuff from Japan in the 90s, and I'm talking New Japan and All Japan. The tag matches were incredible. The junior heavyweight matches were incredible. Choshu and Fujinami. And just a lot of other great goddamn talents. Muda and Liger having their great series. Eddie versus Ray was as perfect of a match as it could be. Probably the most perfect match in WCW. At least during the Monday Night Wars era. Yeah, even the stuff where it looked like maybe a slip-up, they made it work. Ray doing a flip into the DDT. Eddie working on Ray's back. It was a mask versus title match. Ray had, his mask taken off at times or disturbed, so the mask was built into the suit. It was like watching The Phantom with Billy Zane. Boy, that was certainly a movie that existed. Did anybody ever see the movie The Phantom? Please answer us in the comments. Wasn't very good. I should retro view at some point. Nevertheless, let's get back to this. Eddie and Ray created magic that night. The best match in WCW, or at least for WCW in 1997. Eddie and Ray had a great feud. DDP and Savage had a better feud overall as far as arc. But this was incredible. Eddie would win the title back because Ray would obviously beat him. Great way to kick off the pay-per-view. And then they had Roddy Piper versus Hulk Hogan in a steel cage match. Where Randy injured his knee doing like a double axe handle from space. Literally, look how high Randy Savage did that. Watch Eddie versus Ray and then watch Randy Savage basically destroy his knees at about 43 years old. Or 44. So anyway, and then he had frustrations with Bischoff and Creative, even threw coffee at himself. That was in 98. He would still do great work because he was Eddie Guerrero. He couldn't help but do great work. And then the LWO, because we had the NWO, we had the NWO Wolfpack, and let's do the LWO. And they had great members like El Dandy. I mean, who am I to doubt El Dandy? God, that was a great... God, I miss Brett. I miss Brett on TV. I know he's still alive. I'm just saying, I just miss Bret Hart on my television. Oh, good, I have that shirt back there to remind everybody Bret Hart is my favorite wrestler of all time. But who am I to doubt El Dandy? Then, New Year's Day, 1999, Eddie gets injured in a car wreck. Which would unfortunately... stem from alcohol and drug and pain pill abuse. He would return at the end of May 1999. Way too soon. Way too fucking soon. I know that there were injury clauses where you could actually be out and still get paid, but Eddie really wanted to get back. I don't know if it was just a money thing or a drive thing or he was encouraged to get back to work. Probably encouraged to get back to work. But he was in the Revolution. Then that got cut short. Because Eddie, Saturn, Dean, and Benoit would all go to WWE. I do also want to add right here halfway through that I will be doing one on Benoit, what if the Benoit tragedy hadn't happened. And I'm not going to try to humanize Benoit in this or that one, but I will present an alternate version of what could have happened had things been a little different. They signed with WWE. They're the Radicals. Eddie, unfortunately, would suffer, I believe, a dislocated elbow. And while he would work through it, that would lead to more pain pill issues. And you watch it. I think it was against, he did a frog splash on Billy Gunn, I believe. And you see it, his elbow just goes from here to here. The elbow just goes here to here. The elbow goes in a place it's not meant to, folks. It was really, really disgusting. And then he would start to make overtures after, I think it was after WrestleMania 2000 to China. The Mamacita and all that, and God, it was great. He made that work. China was there for everything. China and Eddie had a great chemistry. Eddie had to, he had to earn his GED and to go to prom or something like that or whatever it was. He was a European champion and beaten Jericho for it. He would end up in the Intercontinental Championship hunt. China became IC champion again. He tried to stop China from getting beat up in a match. I think it was a triple threat. It was him, China, and Angle. He tried to revive China, but then accidentally pinned her and won the title. And then this is when China was posing for Playboy. She earned a very sizable contract for that. And Eddie tried to stop the whole thing with China happening, all this, all that. It was great entertaining stuff. And then was caught with two of the Godfather's hosts. One that would become the future Victoria, by the way. And that pairing ended up going away. And then Mania 17 versus Test. And then, unfortunately, he would get into rehab by May. And would get in a car accident in November. And was released a few days later. And I'm not going to get too deep into the drug abuse stuff. It's terrible. It is a disease. It gets frustrating seeing some people being given chance after chance after chance, and eventually you need to just say something like, no, we can't do this anymore. They cut him. He did have a brief indie run. He was at the Ring of Honor debut show. He was actually at the World Wrestling All-Stars only U.S. pay-per-view. And I retro-reviewed those. Check out that WWA. Yeah, that was certainly something. Eddie Guerrero was the inaugural Cruiserweight champion. I think it was Cruiserweight. I reviewed a lot of shit last year. You'll forgive me. And hard to believe that I could say last year, because it's hard to believe we are on the first day of 2023 as I'm recording. IWA Mid-South, wrestled Punk, and a lot of stuff that he did, but he had a brief run in New Japan in March of 2002. And it would relinquish the World Wrestling All-Stars Cruiserweight Championship, come back to WWE in April 2002, feud with RVD over the Intercontinental Championship. Great matches, great series of matches, including one ladder match where a fan tried to get at the ladder and everything, and I hope that fan ended up, falling and breaking their goddamn femurs, and they went through their goddamn sternum into their heart. Anyway, let's move on from that. If you happen to be that fan that interfered, fuck you. Fuck you for being born. Your mother should have taken a code. No wire hangers ever! And then he teamed up with Chris Benoit because the Intercontinental Championship feud, while well done, was short-lived. Teamed up with Benoit, had a tables match against, I believe it was Bubba Ray and Spike. That was at Vengeance 2002. And then teamed with Chavo, Los Guerreros, the vignette. I remember the vignettes kind of annoying me for a bit at first. And I know this is going to sound like a dickish thing to say, because I know that Eddie and Chavo had fun, but Chavo was always well beneath Eddie. And this was kind of done as a way to help elevate Chavo, except that was like trying to basically try to elevate sewage to smell better. I know that sounds mean, but Chavo was always a very good worker. He just wasn't anything more than mid-card. Eddie, you could tell, was destined for superstardom. And would have achieved that well before he did, had not been for the aforementioned issues. But Los Guerreros, hell of a team. Cheating at golf and all that. The Lie, Cheat, Steal. Mania 19 appearance. In a triple threat match against Angle and Haas and Rhino and Benoit, I believe. And then when Chavo got injured, he teamed up with Tajiri for a little bit. That didn't work. Eddie would then end up kind of turning heel, kind of not. He kind of would. He would win the U.S. Championship in the U.S. Tournament, in the U.S. Tournament Finals, when Rhino would end up spearing Benoit after the referee got bumped. He ended up losing the title to Big Show, I believe, at No Mercy 2003. The split from Chavo would happen. Royal Rumble 2004 match, where it was more of an angle match than anything. It wasn't their best match. And then they really, really quickly did Eddie versus Brock as far as a build. And then he went to Cow Palace. No Way Out 2004. The only reason to watch that match, or watch that show rather, is that match. And he wins the WWE Championship. And everybody is just freaking losing it. His mother was there. That was a great moment. His family was there. It was great stuff as far as the Cow Palace, as far as a rich history for Hispanic wrestling, just wrestling in general. That venue, great shit. And then he beats Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 20. And then he has a series of matches against JBL. Eventually loses it at the Great American Bash. I believe it was the bull rope match. Cage match with JBL a little bit after that, where he gets a hell of a goddamn frog splash. And then he teams with Ray. And then we get the feud. The feud over Dominic. Fucking Dominic and his stupid bleach blonde hair back then. But anyway. Don't make me take their papa. I'm your puppy. And then SummerSlam 2005. The deal with Eddie and Ray in the custody of Dominic. And Dusty in a ladder match in 2005 would have been bad. But Eddie just doing that, fiddling with the briefcase, and then Ray eventually had to kick it out. He slammed him out. Where the fuck was Vicky? Gotta love Eddie. And then he teamed with Batista. Bit of an uneasy alliance. No Mercy 2005. He didn't cheat. Batista beat him. And this was all going to lead to Eddie winning the World Championship. The World Championship. It would have been a World Championship because Cena was a WWE champion. And then, unfortunately, November 13, 2005, he was found dead, and I didn't want to believe it. He said no multiple times, thinking that it wasn't true. And then the tribute shows, and it was all emotional and everything. And then they had Ray do the thing in the name of Eddie, and in the name of love. I don't know the rest of the words of that U2 song, so I apologize. And then from there, they honored Eddie. It killed Ray's world title chances because fans would boo him. Not that they hated Ray, but they missed Eddie. And all that. And Eddie Guerrero's legacy still lives on. But what if Eddie had stayed around? What if Eddie had stayed around? What if Eddie, and despite the health issues he had, because he was not off at times. Yes, Eddie had obviously been one of the many using steroids. If you take a look at how he was in 2002, even early 2003, and then you take a look at how he was by that point, you can work out. I'm just saying. You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. And it's not that he was the only one. But what if Eddie hadn't passed away? And I know that sometimes these what-if videos mostly boil down to 80% story and 20% scenarios, but I like to present the overview, then talk about that. So, his eventual world title win was going to come. He was possibly going to beat Batista, if not Survivor Series, possibly at Armageddon in 2005. And then he would have been able to hold it, I hope, through the Rumble, all the way to Mania, maybe hold it a little bit longer. Maybe he could have faced Shawn Michaels. And we wouldn't have had Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon. We wouldn't have had JR saying, yeah, hit him in the head with it and shove it up his ass. How would that be? But we would have had a potential dream match. If the world title win hadn't happened then, if it had happened after Mania 22, you have Eddie in the mix. You have Eddie with a great appearance at the Rumble. Ray could still win it. Ray could still become the champion. Because say Batista got injured, a whole bunch of what ifs. That match with Shawn Michaels, just if the rumors were ever true. Eddie versus Shawn, sign me the hell up. I don't care if Eddie was, nearing 40 and injured. Give him some time off if you need. I mean, maybe you could have done this thing with Batista. You could have had it after Survivor Series. Oh, Eddie needs some time off. Let's give him a little bit of a chance. Let's make sure he's all right. He gets his body right and everything, and have him come back at the Rumble for a big run. And then that feud with Shawn Michaels. And then you give him the world title. You haven't beat Ray, perhaps. Because Ray, let's be perfectly honest, if they had given it to Ray, wouldn't have worked. And then Eddie would have had to try to work with the Great Khali in 2006, which, oh boy, that would have been something. Plethora of opponents. Say he could have faced John Cena in a champion versus champion match. He could have faced Edge. Role reversal. Instead of face Edge, heel Eddie in 2002, face Eddie, heel Edge. Something like that. And that would have helped, elevate the radar superstar. You could have had Eddie, couldn't have had him face JBL. Eddie versus Benoit. Because Benoit at that point, he could have done some great things. Eddie and Ray could have done great things. Eddie and Benoit could have done some great things. He could have transitioned into part-time status and possibly training people by 2007, 2008. He could have had a retirement match at Mania 25 in Texas for what Eddie Guerrero meant to the state of Texas in general. There are so many things that we could have, like I was in the company, that WWE could have done as a company. World title win was coming. He could have still been a U.S. champion. He could have been an ECW champion with that relaunch brand. He could have meant a whole lot to that. He would have been such an incredible influence. Able to help. You could have him versus Punk. Tell me him versus CM Punk for the ECW title wouldn't have actually meant something. That would have been fucking incredible. I would have loved to have seen that. And you could have had Eddie versus Lashley. That would have been great. Eddie could have, been the wily veteran and done everything he could to beat up Bobby Lashley. Bobby! Eddie versus Umanga, as Regal once said. I would have liked to have seen that. Eddie Guerrero could have meant a whole lot, and you have to wonder, and this is where I'm going to put the close on it. If Eddie hadn't passed, what would have happened with the Benoit tragedy? Benoit's health, no doubt, and the fact that he was not a particularly great person, with the fact that there was a, order of protection or restraining order, rather, against him in 0304, something like that. You have to wonder maybe if Eddie could have helped keep Benoit straight, and maybe if he would have been able to get him the help he needed, because then more of the dark past stuff wouldn't have happened. All these things, you have to wonder what would have happened if Eddie Guerrero had survived. Now, also on that same flip side, the wellness policy wouldn't have probably been invented, because there would have been no need. Oh, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then you find out just how much, even though Eddie died and he was clean, it was heart failure. There were certain things that everybody had been on, and certain things that had been happening where it took them that kind of gut punch to realize, shit, we need to change something. Now, I'm not making WWE like the Saint and everything, because it certainly got difficult to defend the company. But I still wish Eddie was here to this day. There are very few wrestlers I still wish were here. Obviously, Eddie wouldn't have wrestled much past Mania 25. I mean, I think that was obvious. He was tired. He was injured. Even if certain treatments, procedures, whatever, had been able to extend his life and he had been able to contribute. It's just a real shame that he passed away at 38 when he was just on another ascent. And he's still missed to this very day. But those are my scenarios. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, please. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.